Welcome to Happiness in the City. This is Barbara, and today I'd like us to focus on a very important topic, and that is the connection between house and authority. Let's see what our wonderful Wikipedia is talking about it. And let's look at the concept of house, right? And we know that this is a concept that has everyday meaning. So here we have in Wikipedia this wonderful definition that a house is a building that functions as a home. So let's first think about this very important definition that house is connected with a concept, with a physical thing that is a building. And I think that we have to have understanding that without a building we cannot have a house, because house, for somebody who doesn't have a building, is a meaningless concept, because the person who is in the streets is homeless may have a house in the sense of thinking that the house can be without a building, but in fact without a building that person is homeless. So the concept of a house is connected to the existence of a building, and then that building can become a home to a person. So home without a building would not be possible. Home has to have a physical thing which we call a building. And this is something that we have to understand, not only in America but in many other countries, that physical buildings are essential for people to have a home, and peace can only be possible when a person has a home in a building. So any concepts of security that ignore the need for buildings to house all people in the realm would not be successful. We talk a lot today about security matters because of many tragedies that have happened around situations of ordinary life, routines of daily living, like people going to school or going to concerts or restaurants. There was even a horrible tragedy in Las Vegas. So we have a situation in which we have to be realistic about the fact that whatever the current concept of security is, failed. The concept didn't work, because if we had security that works, those bloodsheds would not be happening, and they continue to be happening, and there seems to be no end to it unless something happens in our country, and not only in America but in many other countries, that would transform the very sense of security and safety in the population. And I think that we have to come back to ancient understanding of security and peace, and that is always connected with home. Home that provides a place for routines of life, for interactions with people who are close to us, for food, clothing, predictability, stability. So we need to create an understanding of security that is connected with routines of stability. Stability is essential for security in the ancient tradition. Today, there is a lot of instability in the world. We can see this in international markets, in daily life, in relationships. So something must be done to create ways of stability. When I was growing up as a child, I was in very stable situations. So I always want to come back to that sense of security and safety and predictability and stability that comes from trust of people around you and from routines of daily life. One of the routines that I grew up with is the timing for meals. Breakfast, second breakfast, lunch, 5 o'clock tea, supper, dinner. Usual dinner size would be lunch in the original ways of my families, but supper would always be this last meal of the day. So the routine, the rhythm of meals was part of creation of pulsating life. And then, of course, the entire focus of family members when I was growing up was to have spaces to live for every member of the family. House, apartment, room, whatever was available, but the predictability and stability of peace within that beautiful upbringing was always connected with a place, that is building, that would provide the home for a person. And that was considered such a basic need of life that that generation of my family would question those who would ignore it in order to focus on other things, that they would be separated from the building that provides a home. And this not only applied to human beings, but also to all living beings. Chickens had to have chicken houses, cows had to have places in which they lived. There were stables for horses. There was building for harvested grains. There was place for fruits from the trees, etc., etc. Everything had to have a building on a land in order to have the safety of that building, and then the building became home for people, animals, harvests. So the entire focus of my upbringing was to make sure that everything that concerns me or within the lifespan always has a physical building in order for the stability and peace to occur. And this is such a foundation for authority that somehow needs to be restored. When you look at political conversations today, it is focused on very abstract matters of futures incomes, of expectations of profits, of immigration. All of those things are separated from physical beings who are alive, who need buildings to live. If you go through current political literature, there is virtually nothing about that connection between life and home in a building. Of course, we have this vast real estate enterprise that is happening, but real estate in this context is really not to create stability for life, but to create maximum value from a particular building and to make this building a commodity for sale or for valuation. And when you look at all of the conversations about real estate, there's nothing about stability of life, creating stable homes, creating peace. So when we are looking at the need to get a healthy vision of security and safety, we have to understand that the current situation of bad security and safety is connected with the fact that we missed the foundation of security and safety that is traditionally understood as basic need for people to develop a sense that they are not being threatened, and for other people to have a sense that they are not in a situation in which people who have no places to live threaten them. I recommend a new vision for security that would focus on this application of buildings to all living beings on a given territory, and then to create ways in which that stability develops into a sense of joy, into a sense of future, into a sense in which we can actually feel safe in our lives. Because this constant shifting from one place to another, living in fear of losing the building and then becoming homeless, this created a wave of uncertainty, fear, panic, and anxiety that will not disappear even with huge amounts of money spent on security. So we have to admit failure of the past ways of security and develop new ways in which we put the existence of basic human need to be housed in a safe place, and we should focus on understanding that buildings and land are foundations for national security. Because what kind of national security will we have if there are millions of people who are homeless and dying in the streets? They have a right to national security too. National security shouldn't be only about fear of being invaded by other nations, but it should be focused to provide beautiful and joyful and wonderful life to people who are already within a given country. So I think that we have to become very sophisticated about the way we approach the new vision of security and safety. That new vision of security and safety is based on a foundation of the land and buildings on the land that have to be applied in such a way that every living being in that particular country has a place to live and to organize into a home. So we have to have understanding that physicality of buildings in a land is as essential to national security as the existence of the military. Ironically, we have so many veterans of the military who are homeless. Those are men who are willing to risk their lives to defend all citizens of the country they defend. And then they found themselves rejected and dying in the streets because of the lack of that concept of national security connected to buildings that can be turned into homes. There are many ways in which this understanding of the national house can be developed. So I'm bringing this concept of a house at the national level as the concept of national house. So we have a national house. Let's suppose this national house is National House of America. It's not sufficient just to have that concept. This concept has to be connected to buildings. And then those buildings have to be organized in such a way that people can find homes in those buildings. And I think that we need to have that philosophy of housing developed in every city, in every state, at the federal level, and in other countries in the way they are organized. But without the concept of the need for the national house to be connected to buildings and the land, we'll never have security and safety, because people will always fear that they will lose their homes, their hearts will be broken, they will end up homeless, and then they will die from lack of resources to sustain the rhythm of life. Most often people who are homeless die from losing their health. So we have to become much more sophisticated in the ways we approach the very concept of the country. The country is not only a set of rules and regulations, but is a place housing the dwellers of those who live within the country. So the country has to be connected to the concept of buildings within the country. And if the country lacks buildings, the country is just a place with homeless people or potentially homeless people. It's not a stable place, it's not a stable country. Stability must be organized around buildings that safely house families, individuals, animals. Obviously, the only ones that don't need physical buildings are wild animals, but they do have their habitats, and that is often endangered by wrong actions of people who are careless about the needs of wild animals to live. So as I'm now coming to closing statements, I wanted us to refocus the way we talk and think about national security away from abstract concepts that create defense from danger, and focus on creation of joyful, happy, stable buildings that create stability, that are places in which people can develop trust, relationships, and that they can develop stable, beautiful homes. I think that when we focus on this, we will see transformation in the entire sense of security and safety of the entire nation. Because people will focus on creating beautiful buildings that they can use for lifetimes, and from that security of buildings in which there are safe homes, we will organize security services that focus on creation of security and safety within a context in which people already don't have to deal with insecurity, panic, fear, homelessness, and fear of losing of their lives because of the lack of buildings in which they can safely live. So if we focus on security from the foundation of home, then other things will come in the right place and the right understanding, and I know that that would diminish threats from outside. Because if you are homeless, you are already in a threatening situation by the virtue of the lack of a building to house you. So when a threat comes from outside, it only adds to a threat that already exists. Whereas if the nation is safely and securely housed in a building that creates homes, then the external threat becomes easy to handle because it comes from a place of anxiety against the place that already has security, safety, and stability. So we have to focus on creating this vision of buildings as foundation for a secure and happy nation. And when we have that, those other things will not have to cost that much, because the money that is spent on the external security is only contributing to more insecurity, because it never deals with the true problem, and that is lack of buildings that would create homes of great stability. If you have an apartment for 2 years or 3 years, a house that is mortgaged, that you live in fear of losing anytime, that is instability too. And we have a great educated generation now. We have created great smartphones. We can create better ways of funding real estate that we have right now. Why live for decades in fear of losing your mortgage payments and then losing everything? That is a form of instability too. So I encourage you to think about that relationship between the house and authority in very creative ways, and to create pathways that would solve the problem of homelessness or fear of homelessness forever. That we will always have the foundation of buildings in which everybody has homes. And I encourage you to look at the ancient images of what I just said. It's often the encircled city that is defended as a whole from outside forces, but within the city everybody has a place to be and to live. So the transformation of our attention away from fear onto spirit of love, spirit of power, and spirit of sound mind that focuses on life will create security in our lives. And having a situation in which everybody has a home in a building creates security in our lives. And that is another foundation for national security. How to feel safe in our biological life so that we live in joy.